Kutch is the Executive Director of the Thorium Energy Alliance and President of Whole World Design Engineers, which is an engineering services company based in Chicago, Illinois.
Many of you are familiar with the fact that there's two pieces of nearly identical legislation out there, H.R. 4883, S. 2006, and they very simple pieces of legislation, very short. You can read them in just a few minutes, really, and it basically comes down to the bulk of the legislation creates a national rare earth cooperative refinery, and also at the same time to eat that thorium byproduct and the liability that it causes, there is a literal thorium bank created, a Thorium Energy and Industrial Products Corporation, but an actual physical storage facility that would be the best, greatest storage facility way beyond belts and suspenders needed to actually store the thorium safely. Thorium is a very mild alpha emitter, but the reason that the liability is there is that in 1954, the Atomic Energy Act looped in thorium, uranium, and plutonium as the three viable nuclear fuels. And because regulators just have a one-size-fits-all policy, they figure, well, if it's considered a nuclear fuel, we have to treat all nuclear fuels similarly. The fact is, thorium, thorium oxides, thorium nitrates, they're very easily handled, not dangerous whatsoever, and most of them are not water soluble, can't get into the groundwater. So let's see if this thing, oh, that's how you go backwards, Jim. So this is a visual representation of how it would work. Multiple mining companies and providers of the source material, apatite, monazite, bastite, xenotime, what have you. These companies that are currently digging something out of the ground, perhaps iron or potassium, anything that the mines are producing, or like yourself producing rare earths as your main mining product, would now have a facility. And obviously, as Jim said, it would be a pretty large facility to process the full spectrum, especially the heavies, which are what we need most of all. But it would be an actual, literal, physical facility, centrally located in the United States, and holding its hand out there as you process rare earths. The off-takers of it would be U.S. aerospace, U.S. commercial companies, Ford, Siemens, Fujitsu. There's a lot of companies out there that would love to have a second supplier of rare earths. Right now, a monopoly is not an open market. We're all about open markets, but you can't have a market with one person. You know, we would stand up one other, and now you would actually have a functioning market, right? Where there would actually be competition. And we all know from the previous talks that the rare earths themselves don't hold a lot of value. It's what you do with rare earths. I like to say that rare earths are like yeast. You know, yeast itself, there's not a whole lot of value. It's in the atmosphere right now. We're breathing yeast. But what can you do with yeast? You can make beer, penicillin, medicines. So the yeast itself, the rare earths itself, they don't have a particularly huge value. It's the trillions of knock-on effect dollars that you get from doing it. So as you're processing this, you're accepting these materials from the producers, and you're giving the products, the advanced metals, alloys, to the off-takers, who are, some examples are listed there, holding its hand out, because the first thing that comes out of the process is thorium. When you separate rare earths, you get the heaviest stuff to the lightest stuff, and the first thing to come out, the heaviest of them all, is thorium. And the thorium bank would accept that, literally in a physical sense, right at the beginning of the process, and we would encapsulate it and put it in, pelletize it, put it into stainless steel tanks inside a double-lined concrete building, seismically isolated. That's chilled to minus 40 degrees, so absolutely no off-gassing or anything can come from it. I mean, if you want to see our patented literal storage facility, it's very impressive, and probably about 100 times more more than what is really needed. But because it's radioactive and we understand the sensitivities of the public, we want to make sure that nobody can ever say that we didn't go far, far beyond the call of duty to safely store this material. And we're not just going to store it. We're going to come up with uses, and we don't have to go very far. this thorium-bearing rare earth refinery cooperative would be to the Western world what the cities in China have done for China. You know, I am very jealous of the advanced thinking and the far forward planning that China did, because they understood if you have this, now you're going to have research facilities based on this. Medical isotopes will be made from this. Fabrication facilities, alloys, the knock-on effects of this facility, this facility that would be privately funded. You know, there's an eager and waiting group of people that are this to fund this would be de minimis, and yet the knock-on effects would be trillions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars of foreign direct investment, hundreds of thousands of jobs for people in the Western world, and you would have the Silicon Valley of materials research if you built this facility. So there's a huge incentive to do this, and China itself, I like to say as a little aside, has to have this, because China very soon will use 100% of the rare earths they produce. They will legitimately be able to say, we can't afford to export rare earths anymore, we use them all ourselves. And they'd be absolutely right. So everyone should be supporting this. Come on, baby, let's do it. Oh, come on. Oh, I was going the right way. So let's review the bill real quickly. The bill is available. You can download it, of course. But the essence of it is the creation of a thorium bank that will take all liability, hold and safely store thorium. The creation of Industrial Products Corporation will give us a congressional authority to develop industrial uses. And there's a lot of industrial uses. You can see down there that thorium alloys, the tip of every Trident missile, is made out of Thormag. All our jet fighters have thorium magnesium gussets in them. The catalysts, thorium sits right below cerium in the periodic table, so you know that elements have similar properties in columns. They now realize that thorium might be 3-4 times more efficient than cerium at cracking petroleum. So now thorium could help the petroleum industry. Medical isotopes, a vast array of some of the best medical isotopes that were ever proven. The DOE and the NIH together put out a plea to please start producing these isotopes. The other uses include lighting, welding, all sorts of other industrial uses. But of course, the biggest, best use would be energy systems. Thorium is vastly more has more energy uses than uranium or plutonium. Thorium is safer to handle. There's no such thing as highly enriched thorium. When you get thorium out of the mining and refining process, it's ready to use as is, so you don't have to do a lot of the upgrading work that uranium needs. Uranium is water soluble, thorium is not. And if we create energy using thorium, our preferred version of that is in a molten salt reactor. Now, the Norwegians have thorium MOX fuel, and a company in the United States that used to be called Lightbridge was working on a similar thing. Thorium can be used in solid fuel reactors, the CANDU reactor. China has a thorium program for their CANDU systems going on, but by far the best possible use for it would be in a molten salt reactor. And there's a lot of resources for you to go look at molten salt reactor examples, but the highlights are of the molten salt reactor is that it's almost opposite land of the solid fuel reactors. The thorium fuel is dissolved in a salt that doesn't become liquid until about 400 or 500 degrees. The energy, the standard operating temperature for one of these reactors is 600 degrees Celsius, 3 times that of a light water reactor. Light water reactors run at about 200 degrees Celsius, 330 degrees Fahrenheit. A thorium reactor is able to do a lot more because of that. Now you have a very compact, very safe system. It's not under pressure. So now you get the idea that this is not going to be a waste byproduct anymore. This is not going to be a burden. This isn't going to be a liability issue. Now we will take something that has kept us for 30 years from participating in the rare earth industry and turn the number one cause of keeping us from participating in the vast growth that rare earths offer. And we're going to turn even that product into beautiful products, advanced alloys, isotopes, electronics, defense, and of course, most of all, that box at the top should be gigantic, energy. And energy in the safest, purest, most concentrated form that you've ever been able to create. And so, come on, baby. Just a quick overview. I started talking about this, but just to go into it a little bit more. Light water reactors, they use water as a coolant. They're under tremendous pressure, 3,000 psi. They really don't make very good heat. 330 degrees isn't very hot at all. Molten salt reactors can't blow up. There's no water coolant. They aren't under any pressure. You could actually lift the lid off of an operating molten salt reactor and look into it. It'd be water clear. You'd see it swirling around like a hot tub. They can't melt down because they are melted down. The whole point of it is anytime you stop working with the molten salt reactor, it solidifies. There's no way that if, let's say a meteor came out of the sky and cracked one of these reactors open, it would split open. The fluid would fall out and solidify, start solidifying almost immediately. And we know from Fukushima that this is not what happens when you crack open a pressurized water reactor, a PWR. You get a lot of bad things tend to start to happen, hydrogen production, all that good stuff, and then you get things that go boom. And so we don't like that. We've been well served by light water reactors, pressurized water reactors. It is still the safest, cleanest, least dangerous energy source, but we could do even better. Wouldn't you want to do something that's 10 times better? I mean, the number one thing that keeps us from doing this, though, right now, the DOE is not especially excited about developing a reactor system that is so much better than their existing fleet that the public would pretty much demand, hey, we got to get rid of this existing fleet and change it over and the decommissioning costs would probably be pretty steep. You can imagine what it would cost to decommission 104 reactors. But to be honest with you, you could probably pay for it because the new reactor systems, the molten salt reactors, would be so much more efficient. And the type of development traditionally done was subsidized by the government. That's how we can afford. The reason the light water reactors have to be so big, they're 1,000 megawatts, 2,000 megawatts, is that's the only economy of scale at which they work. The molten salt reactors work down to 10 megawatts, 80 megawatts, 200 megawatts. So if you need 1,000 megawatts, you'd have 5 molten salt reactors instead of just one tremendously gigantic light water reactor unit. And the cost is 1/5, maybe even as little as 10%, because remember, you don't have these huge containment vessels, these giant containment buildings, these huge 7 and 8 stage turbines to make your electricity. Everything is more compact, everything is safer. And so that in a nutshell is why the molten salt reactor became an orphan reactor. Basically in the 50s, the light water reactor became the reactor of choice for the Navy, and the suppliers of that, General Electric, Westinghouse, said, hey, we've built up this whole supply chain and expertise. Let's just make a civilian reactor out of this military reactor. And even President Kennedy and Glenn Seaborg, in their study of it, said, no, a molten salt system using thorium, that should be the civilian reactor, because you can't make bombs out of thorium. The byproducts of thorium are nearly inert, and when you burn thorium in a molten salt reactor, you get 99.999% burnup. When you burn uranium in a light water reactor, you get 1 or maybe 3, or if you're the French, you get about 5% burnup. So when you use fuel in a light water reactor, you're leaving 95% of that energy sitting in a parking lot in dry cast storage. Molten salt reactor will use 99.99% of the available energy. So just to reiterate a little bit, the advantages are, just as I said, uses almost all of the available fuel, safely operates at 700 degrees C. I like to say with molten salt reactors, you are working very hard to keep them running, and anytime you stop, they shut off. Light water reactors are almost the opposite. You're working hard to keep them from running out of control, and anytime you stop doing that, they do run out of control. So you should be jotting down molten salt reactors, thorium molten salt reactors, because there's a lot of additional information about other reasons why. They also can run on other things than just thorium. For instance, there's reactor designs that could use up all the spent fuel. You know, you can run these reactors on uranium and plutonium, and these are some of the other industrial applications when you are able to use a thorium reactor. Especially the environmental impact. If you can create liquid fuel from coal, because now you have these high temperatures, the generation, you'd reduce carbon emissions by 35%, converting coal to liquid fuels, 15% petroleum, chemical processing. Altogether, you'd lower greenhouse emissions by 65%. So if you're not a fan of nuclear, you should be now, because you are going to have the ultimate greenhouse gas killer. And but we're going to turn some of the products and processes that used to be the dirtiest into some of the cleanest. That should excite anyone, from an industrialist to an environmentalist. So the good news is the DOE is working to develop these molten salt reactors, and the trouble is they're doing it in China. So our DOE scientists are in China working with the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And China, to their great credit, is spending billions of dollars and employing thousands of people. And they have just upped the entry date for the first commercial reactor, molten salt reactor, to 2024. It had been 2034. That's what great confidence China has in developing the molten salt technology. And yet, we have this idea, probably a touch misguided, that China will share this with us. And I'm kind of thinking they'll share it with us by selling it to us or renting it to us. They probably aren't going to let us just make our own industry. And the knock-on effects of that would be one more huge opportunity lost for us. We will become purchasers and renters and not makers and doers. So I'd like to hand it off to Printus LeBlanc now. Are there any questions while Printus comes up here? Ma'am?
Rachel Evans, Bloomberg BNA. You had said that we are maybe 30 years, or you had said that at some point China is going to keep all of their rare earths, and it's going to be acceptable that they're going to do this because they'll be using all of it.
Yeah.
When is that? When does that happen?
Could be as little as
2018. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, look, there's so much misinformation going on. China has an installed capacity, an official installed capacity of rare earths that is 200% over market demand right now. So they're just showing you as much demand as they want to show, or production as they want to show you. Tomorrow, they could bring on another 100% of global demand, put everybody out of business. They can do that at any time. You have to remember, this isn't a China national industrial defense policy. This is a China global industrial defense policy. They're going to take over the whole world with this stuff. And you have to understand, this thing about thorium molten salt reactors, this is just their next monopoly. So they're going to go from controlling the materials to controlling energy. And if you look at markets around the world, the single biggest market on the planet Earth is energy. And when they can take control of that and they own the IP and they enforce it because they can, and then we have written all these great rules about enforcing IP, and suddenly they're all being used against us. And they control the steel industry because they have the cleanest, highest tech, lowest cost way to do it. The chemical industry, the fertilizer industry, energy, you know, liquid fuels. Where are we going to be? The United States needs to respond. We need to respond to some things. We can't just be totally passive and say, free markets will fix this one. The free markets aren't in the room. They're nowhere. So,
well, I was just going to say, a free market doesn't exist when you have a single player. You need multiple players to have a free market. And we must, in the Western world, step up and participate in this.